and I run a small tour company called Secret Zagreb, and today we're going to follow the footsteps of the badass women of Zagreb. That's the name of today's tour, so let's go! So this square, Zrinjevac, is a great place to start any tour of Zagreb because this was the end of the city back in 1870s. And when this park was planned, they wanted to build statues, busts like these, all around the fields of Zrinjevac. However, they have never finished this plan. So there are only a few statues that are here up to this day. People are pretty random. There are some artists and some army men and some politicians, great personalities of all sorts. And I wonder if this was finished, this plan, whether there would be any woman here around this square. Because if you take a better look, there are no women here right now. Slava Raskaj was born in Ozalj, and as a young woman, her family sent her to Zagreb, which also tells you a lot about the way she grew up, because her family was so supportive to send a young woman back at the end of the 19th century to study arts. I mean, that was almost crazy for those days. And not to mention that she was both numb and deaf. And imagine this incredibly brave creature in a big city, of the city that was just being developed at those times, studying art and living art, literally. Because at that time it was very popular to paint portraits, and what kind of a crazy artist would it take to paint landscapes? That's what she did. One of the famous Croatian ladies is Ivana Brlić-Mažuranić, a writer known for her children's literature. However, she was such a complex personality, and on this location I would just like to mention that she was the first female member of the Academy of Sciences and Arts. This is the building of the Academy behind me. And she was accepted to the Academy back in 1937, while the institution was started back in 1860s, and she wasn't even a regular member. The first regular female member was introduced back in 1973. That's 112 years after the institution was founded. So as you can see, this is going to be a story about the invisibility of women in Zagreb. I chose this little quote that she wrote in her diary as a little girl. "Dear God, if it's not a sin to plead for such a thing, give me the talent to write books." Well, wish granted. We're standing next to a memory of two women, Zdenka and Rajka Baković. They were two sisters who, back in the times of the Second World War, joined the anti-fascist movement by holding a newsstand that sold newspaper, even international press, which meant that a lot of even Gestapo officers came to their place. But at the same time, they managed to give secret messages that helped spread the anti-fascist movement here in Zagreb. They were eventually captured, tortured, and one of them was admitted to hospital, and the very description says that she was half dead when she was admitted, and the other one, she probably jumped off the window of her prison cell in nowadays Zvonimirova Street, and the other version could be that someone pushed her. In any way, those two women, no matter how tragical their story is, at least they got a proper memory and a street. Okay, maybe it's not a real street, it's just a passage. This passage where we're standing is named after them. And however, this is the only street or passage, a place in the lower town, the so-called Donji Grad, that holds the name of a woman. Which brings us to some other pretty embarrassing facts, I would say. Out of 3,600 streets in Zagreb, only 70 are named after women. When it comes to squares, the situation is even worse. 3 squares in Zagreb are named after women. So I suggest that we find at least one of them. The stories about the Black Queen are still here, and supposedly if you walk through the forests of Zagreb, there's a chance you might see a snake queen. This could be the Black Queen herself. If you give her a kiss, she might turn to the queen again, and you would be the owner of her cursed treasure for a very short while, I guess, because if the stories are true, you don't want to be in her company for too much time, right? We are just outside of the old town, and as we enter it, we are going to pass through a former location of a gate. But isn't it strange to have a whole forest left behind so close to the old town? Well, it is believed that people didn't really want to build houses near the place where they used to burn the witches, which was somewhere in this forest, probably next to the cinema called Tuškanac, but the exact location is not perfectly clear. Yes, it brings us to the topic of witch hunts and witch trials here in Zagreb. And the worst trials happened back in 1700s, so late in history, and dozens of women ended up in flames. Usually, if you got on trial, you were as good as dead. And actually, in this building right next to us, the archives, there are so many court records left behind, where you can read everything. What did they ask a woman, and what did it take to get the right answer? And it wasn't nice. Usually, after a few days of torture, they got such crazy confessions that it turns out that it was kind of crazy here in Zagreb in those days, with all those women having naked parties on top of the mountains, not just here in Zagreb, but all over Croatia. It was really crazy according to the testimonials. And still, even if they confessed, they brought them to their death. All except one. There was this woman called Barbara Cindek, whose story is almost like a novel. She was accused of witchcraft back in 1740s, which was already the time when some people were against the trials and they started helping her. So she got out of the prison and then got back in prison after this testimonial of a person who saw the devil in her pocket. Then, I mean, what can you do against that kind of a testimonial, right? And we don't really know what happened to her in the end, even though there are so many records and they are so exciting, but we don't really know what happened to her, so we can only hope that her story ends just like the novel that was inspired by her case, The Witch of Grič, Grička vještica, one of the best-selling novels of Zagreb, written by a witch herself, I'd like to add, Marija Juric Zagorka, the amazing woman who is mentioned on every single tour, so it would be really unfair not to mention her on Badass Women of Zagreb tour. Marija Juric Zagorka was really inspired by real history of Zagreb when she wrote her novel. However, she wasn't just a writer, she was also a journalist, the first political reporter, female reporter in this part of Europe. She was an editor herself, also the editor of female magazines. She chose female leads for her novels, which was quite a surprise in those times. And people actually asked her, so where do you even find the inspiration for your work? And then she said, I will just show you the picture. See, this is one of her latest photographs with this dreamy look of hers that never stopped dreaming. And look what she says. To those who asked me with a mocking smile on their faces, where did I find the heroic characters for my novels? I found them watching the life and struggle of unknown Croatian heroines. The Marija Jambrišak, a woman, decided to give a speech and request equal pay for women, not to increase their payrolls, but to have equal pays exact same as male teachers. And this is considered to be the first speech for women's equality in Croatia. 1871, Marija Jambrišak, right here. After a long walk, in 2 hours, we covered so many streets and some side alleys, even a forest, and we barely found any streets or squares named after women. But finally, we reached a square, a beautiful square in the center of the city, named after Katarina Zrinska. And most of the locals, quite ironically, think that it's named after Saint Catherine, because this is also the home of the Saint Catherine's Church. But no, these days the square bears the name of a 17th century noblewoman, Katarina Zrinska, who was known to be a great diplomat, who knew several foreign languages, and who was also a poetess, a poetess. And she wrote a beautiful book of prayers in Croatian, and by doing that, back in the 17th century, she brought spirituality in homes of so many people. And I would like to mention Marija Juric Zagorka one more time, the famous writer and journalist and editor and activist, and probably one of the most popular residents, including men, in Zagreb ever. Well, this woman wrote a lot about women and thought a lot about their position in society, and in one of her essays she remembers the case of an unknown heroine. And this unknown heroine, believe it or not, even has a street here in Zagreb named just like that, Ulica Neznane Junakinje, Unknown Heroine Street. This was a woman that was discovered after a great 1566 battle. It was a battle against Suleiman the Great in Sziget, in nowadays Hungary. And in piles of bodies, they discover a body of a woman dressed in a male uniform. And this incredible case got her a street, as you can see. One of the rare women in Zagreb that has a street named after her. But then thinking about that case and so many others similar and cases, Zagorka got to this conclusion that all of the women around us are heroines in different ways, and all it takes is look around you to notice their struggle in every single corner of the world and of our lives. And I could agree with that too. I mean, on this tour, which shows women that were really exceptional and fought for their own beliefs and didn't care about what people think, or at least put that aside in order to accomplish something themselves. I have a friend who still cherishes one tradition that got so typical for this region, northwestern Croatia, and I would like to give you a little memory as a token. See, listen to her heart, that's what she does. And it's a heart, so it's kind of a symbol of Zagreb, even though it's produced in this whole region of northwestern Croatia. So I have one for each of you, and there's a little quote inside, so I would like to ask you to maybe open it and see which quote you got. It's like a Chinese cookie of badass Croatian women. It's hard to get to it, see, just like it's hard to get to the stories about our women. Oh, I love this one.
They will call me a fool and say that my mind is all messed up. Well, that's right.